our parenting seminar titled 12 Huge Mistakes Parents Can Avoid. Much of what we're going to be sharing is gleaned from a book from the same title called 12 Huge Mistakes Parents Can Avoid by Tim Elmore. And we do encourage you to pick up the book and read through it. We're only going to be really scratching the surface over these next three days. If you're visiting with us, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Rob Young, the family minister here at the Long Island Church of Christ. Just to give you a little background of my background. And I really share these things because it's almost like it makes me say, wow, I can't believe that's actually true, right? So I've been married for almost 20 years. I'm like, wow. You know, I have 3 children. 18, 17, and soon to be 16. That makes me say, wow, too. I'm like, man, where'd the time go, right? But I'm very passionate about the next generation because I realize, I won't be here forever. And so I'm really passionate about making sure we pass our faith on to the next generation. And so I'm here with my compadre.
Good afternoon. My name is Gerard Tubi. I'm the children's minister here. Not married as long as Rob, 13 years. I have 3 beautiful children. 9, 11, and 6. And pretty much 20 years ago when I became a disciple, I decided I want to do things God's way. I did things 20 years by myself, my own way. It left to a lot of chaos, a lot of destruction in my life. So in marrying my wife, my beautiful wife of 13 years, I did it God's way. Now raising children, I'm doing my best to really use the scriptures through this book in raising godly children. And pretty much I'm going to be focusing on 0 to 12. That's where my children are. And our brother Rob is going to be focusing on 12 and up because that's where his children are as we go through this course together.
And I put that information up behind me. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to reach out to us by email or by phone. A few housekeeping rules. Number 1, if you are visiting with us and you have a child that needs to be in the nursery, we do have that available. All you need to do is see one of the supervisors. If your child is in the nursery, as soon as we're done with this segment of Vacation Bible School, please make sure you go and pick your child up. Also, bathrooms, if you're not familiar with the building, are in the back foyer lobby area, and there's also a handicap accessible bathroom behind us. Coffee, for the coffee people. I know there's some coffee people out there. We do have coffee available in the back, and you can feel free, if you feel the need, right? I saw some hand go up, right? Praise the Lord. If you feel the need, you can feel free to go back and get coffee. If you need to get a snack, because we're gonna be going, that's fine too, because you should be able to hear us from back there. The only thing I ask is that you don't bring the coffee and the snacks into this area, okay? You can have it back there, and you should be able to continue to hear and listen to the lesson.
Okay, so before we start diving into the 12 mistakes, everyone should have got an over-functioning parent quiz. If you haven't gotten one, our brother Victor has a bunch of copies here. Just raise your hand, and he'll be able to get you one quickly. All right. For those of you who have completed it, I ask that you put your name and your mobile phone number on it and pass them forward. Me and Rob are going to grade them, an A or F. No, just totally joking on that. Really, we're here tonight because, as parents, this is a journey, and we want to go through this together. That's why we're going through this book. I'm assuming everyone here tonight has a desire to become a better parent. You never get to a parent and say, I've been the best. So it's really a journey. We ask that you do go through the quiz. If you're just getting it now, go through it, and really focus on the where you scored high on. Where you scored high on is where you're going to really want to pay your time and attention on the different areas.
All right. So we're going to give you just a couple of minutes to do that, because I know you guys, once you get a piece of paper and you got instructions, you want to do it. So take a couple of minutes. It shouldn't take very long. But like Gerard said, where you score the highest, that's where you want to pay the most attention as we go through the next few days. Okay? If you're a grandparent and you have it, I encourage you to do it also, because you may find yourself in a parenting role of some sort. And so this is all good information to gain as you move forward in this journey. So I'm going to give you 2 more minutes. And while you're doing that, just to let you know, if at any time you can't hear us or we're going too fast or something like that, just let us know, right? This is very, informal, and so you can just let us know, like, hey, slow down, speak up, turn up the mic, whatever the case. I don't think anyone's telling me to turn up the mic, but...
Possibly me.
So we'll take one more minute and then we'll start to jump in. Remember, this is for you. This is for you. So take the time to do it. If you don't get it done all now, you can do it a little bit later, but this is for your knowledge as we go through the material. Okay, so we're gonna jump in to the material. First, we want to set the foundation, right? Why would we, and why are Gerard and I interested in talking about the 12 huge mistakes that parents should avoid? Well, one of the things that we all have to take into account is that we're raising a generation of firsts, right? These are people who don't need adults for information, right? What do? If we need information, we Google it.
And they can put or broadcast any thought or emotion they're having at any time of the day on various social medias, right? You have Facebook, you have Twitter, and they put it out there, any thought or emotion they're having. And once it's there, it's there.
They have external stimuli 24/7, right? In the form of a cell phone, a tablet, or a laptop.
So what we also noticed too in this book, they talked about how though this generation is the most socially connected through social media, they're also the most isolated, right? They tend to find them very isolated and very by themselves when it comes to physical face-to-face contact.
This is also a generation that learns from a portable device rather than a person.
And basically a lot of things we grew up with is being replaced by this object right here. So instead of a wristwatch, they have this. Instead of a camera, they have a phone, calendar, alarm clock, and board games. Everything's being replaced by these smartphones, which we have today.
And so with that being said, we have to start to think about the stages of our parenting and make sure that we're covering all the bases, because we're definitely dealing with children who are a little bit different than ourselves. And so we're going to share with you 7 stages of parenting before we get into the 12 huge mistakes. The first stage being the one you see behind me, it's the inspecting stage, right? When you bring your kids home, when they're born, you bring them home, you examine them thoroughly, right? You size them up, you look at their toes, their fingers, you want to know who do they look like? You start to come up with a whole lot of things about that child. The problem is that too much inspecting can push parents to compare and compete with other families, which can lead to unhealthy distractions from the goal of simply loving and raising their child.
And so the next stage is stage 2, is correcting. And this is about our bent to remedy any problem that we see in the first 1 to 2 years of their being born. Unfortunately, this stage can go on for decades. Because of their love and concern, parents are preoccupied with fixing every wrong and every small impairment or deficit quality that we see. We're fixed on correcting right away. And too much correcting can make our young children feel as though they don't measure up to our parents' standards. And kids who go through this often feel inadequate, unloved, and rejected.
Stage number 3, right? Protecting. Okay? At stage 3, children have usually begun the schooling process and begin to interact with the outside world. Parents begin to focus intently on keeping their child safe and secure. It is normal for us to safeguard our kids from harm, but we can sometimes go overboard with helmets, knee pads, safety belts, cell phones, background checks, and the like. Too much protecting can stunt a child's growth. Kids need to experience the appropriate levels of risk and failure in order to mature in a healthy way.
So stage 4 brings us to neglecting, and neglecting is when children enter their tween or teen years and they begin to feel like aliens around us adults. When parents don't quite know what to do with their new kid, they often back off and they back down from offering clear leadership. And we fear the unknown as parents, and we don't ever want to look uncool. So we don't ask the questions that are very vital during this stage. But too much neglect communicates that we as parents are not engaged and we don't care. And kids can easily confuse our lack of engagement with ignorance and apathy. At this stage, it is vital, it is absolutely crucial for parents to become a new type of leader. They need to adapt and mold and change as their children are growing into their teen and tween years.
Absolutely. Stage number 5, suspecting. Some of us are in that stage. Parents enter stage 5 as their kids experience adolescence. Hormones have kicked in, and mom and dad get suspicious about their kids' secrecy and strange new habits and styles. Innocence is replaced by savvy lifestyles and vocabulary. What up, bruh? Right? Without a plan, parents and kids separate into this stage of estrangement. This kind of suspicion can breed distrust. The distrust may be well-deserved, but communication, and sometimes over-communication, is the key to this stage of your child's life. Talk, and more talk.
Absolutely, more communication. Stage 6 is resurrecting. So children begin to enter college, or they show signs of wanting to separate from mom and dad's leadership. And parents want to resurrect the relationship at any cost. This is a crucial stage, once again, for parents to journey through successfully. And what we're going to learn is, when we're teaching our kids how to ride a bike, you want to give support and back off, support and back off, support and back off, so eventually they can ride their bike.
And then stage number 7, now this is the stage that many of us are missing in our parenting. This is the expecting stage, right? If you can read the image I have there, it says, my parents told me to keep my expectations low so I will never be disappointed in life, right? That's sad, but in many cases, that's the parenting style many people are adopting today. We under-challenge kids with meaningful work to accomplish. We just don't have many expectations of kids today. Eventually, we assume that they are incapable. Instead of rising to our expectations, they drop their heads to play a video game, scan YouTube clips, check Instagram, or a Snapchat post.
So think about this. 100 years ago, 17-year-olds were leading armies, working on farms, learning trades as apprentices, and they could hardly wait to make that transition from their own household and making their own statement, leaving their parents and going out to the world and making their own mark in the world. And I was in Amish country about 3 weeks ago, went to Hershey Park, and we were driving back, and I was just sharing with my wife, we need to challenge our kids more. There's these 16-year-old, 15-year-olds with their siblings in the back of a horse-drawn carriage with 18 wheels blowing past them, and they're just galloping along like nothing's happening, right? These are very responsible adults. There's a lot we can learn in challenging our kids at a young age and really setting the bar high for them.
So there are a few takeaways that we want you to keep in mind as we go through these next few days. First, we want you to find out what your kids feel deeply about, right? To really look into their passions.
So we want you to give them a challenge. As Rob was talking about before, giving our kids a challenge, and it's okay if they fail in that challenge.
Expect them to do something significant, right? Sometimes we ask them to do menial tasks, but have you asked your child and expected your child to do something of importance?
And give them an opportunity to make great expectations. So we're going to see tonight, or through the next 3 days, that it's okay to set the bar high and for them to fall below the bar. Because then we can talk about it, work them through it, and failing underneath our household, underneath our care, so it will prepare them later on for life.
You also want to help them build great expectations of their own. So at some point, maybe it's 0 to 12, your child is meeting your expectation, but from 12 and up, you want to help them create their own expectations and meet their own expectations and do something big for themselves.
And as Rob talked about today in the main lesson, if you miss it, we want to invite them into a story that matters, right? The story that really we want to create for them is that they have a place, a needed place within the family unit, and then on top of that, a greater place in God's kingdom. So we really want to instill at a younger age and let them see that life is just not about them. There's a lot bigger story out there. We want to invite them into that story, make them part of that story.
So I added a slide, Gerard.
Okay.
So this is the main takeaway, okay? If you don't take anything else away, please take this away after 3 days. We are not raising kids. We are raising adults, Your goal is not to, in 18 years, 25 years, say, look at my child. I've turned them into the best child ever. No, you want to say, look, I've raised a really responsible, a really conscious, a really influential, hopefully a faithful, godly adult. That's what we're doing here. We want to raise adults. They will not be children forever, and there's nothing you can do about it. They will grow, right? They will grow. So keep that in mind. Are we ready to take this journey into the 12 mistakes parents can avoid? Yeah. All right, let's go. So, mistake number 1.
As parents, we've given them lots of possessions, but little perspective. As coaches, we taught them how to win the games, but not how to win life. And as youth workers, people who work with children, we provide lots of explanations, but not enough experiences. We really want to also not only give the knowledge, but also experience and exposing them to actually put their hands on things or do things as a child and adult.
In the 80s, we got scared. I don't know if many of you know, there was like a Tylenol scare back in the 80s. And so at that time, all of a sudden, parents from around the country decided, you know what we need to do? We need to safeguard our children. That grew in the 90s to us now taking this mindset that we need to make sure that our kids are self-confident, they have lots of self-esteem, and they are very comfortable. You know how that showed up? Because all of a sudden in every bathroom that you go in now, what do they have? A changing table, right? Why do we have changing tables in bathrooms? Bathrooms are for people who know how to use the bathroom, right? But we have changing tables across the country because now children have taken that priority. Over time, this has manifested itself in a way that we say we cannot let our kids fail. This has become an international syndrome now.
So 17, consequences. It forces the fear of failure later on in life. So if I have never failed or have had very, very few occasions of failing and how to deal with that failure, I will not be emotionally prepared to deal with it in adulthood, right? So we're going to talk about how failing is actually a muscle, and it's good to work that muscle out, especially when they're younger, getting that feeling of failing and learning how to walk them, talk them through it. So later on, when it hits them in life, they're prepared. And it dilutes the will or motivation. If everything I do, from throwing out the trash to getting the game shot, is awesome and great, why try harder, right? I'm awesome and great. So if I instill this thought in my child that everything I do is awesome and great, they have no desire, no will to try harder because mommy and dad say I'm awesome and great at everything. So we really want to curb that affirmation, as we're going to see later.
So some scriptural references to this. James chapter 1, we're all familiar with James 1. Right? It says, consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you face trials of many kinds. Now imagine if I'm a child growing up, and every time a trial's coming my way, my parent whips me away, and I don't get to go through that trial anymore. And in my mind, life is just good. There are no issues. I don't have any problems. I live a sweet life, right? Now, the way James 1 finishes, that little segment finishes, it says, consider it pure joy, my brothers, that you face, when you face trials of many kinds. Why? Because we know that this will bring about, do you know the word that's there? Maturity. When we face trials, when we fail, when we go through hardship, it brings about maturity. As we go through this material, you should also reflect on your own life and say, you know what? How have I become the person I am today? Is it because of all the good things that happened to me? Or is it because of some of the bad things that have happened to me, that have shaped me, that have helped me to be a better person because of those hardships? Hebrews goes on to tell us in chapter 12, verses 3 through 11, it ends by telling us that hardship ends in a harvest of righteousness, right? And so once again, we have this idea of everything not going well for me, making me a better person in the long run. If we don't allow our children to go through things that don't destroy them, they may hurt for a little while, but in the end, it's going to make them better people. Okay? If I fall from the top of the monkey bars, anybody ever done that before? What do you learn from that experience? Don't go to the top again, right? Or hold on tight. You learn something from that experience, right? Now imagine what happens when you never have that experience. you never get that learning. And then you can easily become 16, 18, 22, and you haven't experienced what it's like to do something dumb and hurt yourself. And when you do it at 16 or 18 or 22, it becomes something that can destroy you.
You're still up.
Creating the solutions. Let's talk about the solutions. The first thing we need to do for our children is we need to create a safe place for them to fail. When people, especially young people, know they are free to try something and fail, their performance usually improves. It brings about the best in them, right? It brings out the best. Now, I've had 2 children who just learned to drive, okay? And so, as one of them learned to drive, there's that day where you pull into the driveway, and you're like, this is easy, right? You just pull into the driveway, right? And you pull into the driveway, and you realize they're just a little too close to the right side. And as you utter the word, stop, the gate is gone, right? Like that's it. It's gone. But when there's an environment for failure, it's like, hey, that's okay. You're learning to drive, right? Like you don't know how to drive yet, so you're learning to drive. These are the kinds of things that can happen. It's very important to know where the brake and the gas are so this doesn't happen again, right? That was a life lesson. Now, the child who did that is very cautious when she's driving because she had an experience where she took out the gate. And so now that just always is in her mind, like, hey, this is a powerful piece of machinery, and if I don't do the right thing, damage will occur, right? So that's a practical of just creating that safe environment for your kid. Understand, all of our kids are in this process of growing. So typically, they're going to make lots of mistakes. Best thing we can do is when they make those mistakes is say, hey, let me tell you about how I made that same mistake.
And we want to help them to see the benefits of failing. Failure can create resilience. Failure can force our children to evaluate and reflect on how they failed or why they failed. And failure can motivate our children to become better performers. And failure promotes creativity and discovery. And failure can develop maturity. I'm going to keep it anonymous here. Dealing with 0 to 12, my 3 children have different qualities, different strengths, different attributes. One of my children is very, very smart, but she's lazy. So my wife's doing some review with them. And basically, if they get there's 15 words. If you get 12 to 15 words correct, you get the $1. Less than 12, you get 75 cents. So the 2 that had to study harder, they studied really, really hard. They got the $1. The one that was smart, she missed 3, so she got 12. And she started to cry. And like when my daughter, I didn't want my daughters, I kind of gave it away. It wasn't like the emotion, like, ah! It was kind of like those small ones that it really hurt her, it really stung her. But my wife, she was like, should I just give it to her? Should I just cave in? I was like, no, let her feel it, let her work through it. And we talked her through, we worked her through it. And then she was able to come back and do well on the next time she had a test. So it's vital as we go through parenting, those little things when they're a child, you can walk them through it, talk them through it, can lead to a better harvest later on. She learned that day, not everyone who tries got the $1. Those who tried and worked hard got the $1. And so she worked hard and she got it again next time she tried.
So the last thing we want to do is we want to help them make failure their best friend. Ben Franklin once said, things which hurt instruct. Okay, it's very important that your attitude toward failure, we understand that it will inform your altitude towards failure. If you have the right perspective, failure is your best friend, right? Not Thomas. What's his name? Edison. It's Thomas Edison, right? Thomas Edison tried 999 times before he actually got the experiment right and why we have lights today. If he would have given up along the way and not allow his failure to inform him every step of the way, I might be talking to you in the dark right now. I'm just saying.
And we have a slide here. So MJ, Air Jordan, Michael Jordan, right? Most of us know him, especially grew up in the 80s and 90s. You know about this famous basketball player. NBA MVP 5 times, led the Chicago Bulls to 6 national championships. And this is what he had to say about failure. I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeeded.
Right? So that's a really good lesson from somebody who none of us would think from the perspective of basketball could be considered a failure. And he's not. But he shares with you that the reason why he is considered the best basketball player in the whole world, forget you LeBron fans, best basketball player in the whole world is because of all of the information he gained from the failures that he endured in his life. We don't want to hold failure back from our kids.
Okay, so mistake number 2, we project our lives on them. This is when adults project or they pressure their kids to become someone they are not. And so we're going to go into history and research of this mistake. You probably know about it. You probably, unfortunately, have seen it. It's dads yelling at the Little League umpires. Right? You've seen it, right? Unfortunately, it's out there, but you have grown men literally yelling because their 7-year-old, should have been out or in or whatever it may be, but dad's losing it over simple Little League games. Moms attacking the daughter's frenemy. Once again, this is happening. This is all out there. Unfortunately, this is true. And stage moms going ballistic, right? Going ballistic when their son or daughter don't get the part that they think they should have got because they've been telling their son, their daughter, they're awesome their whole life. And now, as a culture, as a nation, really think about this. We're not sure if we should laugh or if we should cry what's going on today in our culture.
And so here are some consequences to when we project our lives on our children. The first thing is we fail to model healthy behavior that kids can emulate. Obviously, if you're a dad yelling at the umpire, what is your kid going to grow up and become, right? It would be no surprise to you that your kid yells at the teacher, right? Because they've learned that behavior. We create stress in our kids as well, forcing them to become someone they're not. And we're going to look at a verse which is on the slide, Proverbs 22:6. It says to raise a child in the way they should go. You have to believe that God has created in every single one of us a way that we should go. If you force your children to go your way, and God has created in them another way, there's going to be a problem. There's going to be conflict. Our relationship with them becomes strained and unhealthy, right? Strained and unhealthy. Why? Because once again, your child may have a God-given desire or a passion, and you're saying, no, you're not going to do that. You're going to go in this other direction. And we see here, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4, tells us not to frustrate, not to exasperate our children. How do we do that? By mixing up God's will with our own will for our child. Ultimately, we're trying to seek God's will for our children. And so we need to make sure that we don't project ourselves on them.
So these are 4 vital inner needs. The first one being belonging. That's the inner need that all of us have, especially our children have. And if it's missing, they can become very insecure. And some symptoms, if you've especially seen this in my children or your own children, you want to take note of it. Symptoms include overcompensation. Thank you.
Say that with me. Compensation.
Emotional highs and lows. We have to look at our children and see if they are demonstrating these things and address it because they have a deep need, a deep belonging, and that can first and foremost, be with the family, really plugging them into the family to avoid that insecurity in our children.
And so the second one here is worth. And you can imagine, as much as we all know, when we come home from work, we want to come home to a safe place, and we want to come to a place where we're valued. And so that should happen in the home. And if that worth is not there, then your child is going to feel inferior, right? They're going to feel like maybe I'm never good enough. And that comes out in competition. It comes out in self-doubt. It comes out in the need for recognition, right? That's that child who says, wait, you said they did a good job. What about me? Right? And you're wondering, like, well, you didn't do anything. Why should I be recognizing you? Well, that could be a sign that they're facing some inferiority. Competence is the third one. And if kids don't feel competent. Now, competent means that I feel capable of doing something. And so it's our responsibility to teach our child to do something and then allow them to do it, right? I can think of a time when my son, his job was the garbage. Now, you guys see him now and you're all saying, man, he's taller than you. But at some point, he wasn't. And so he was this little guy, and I'm like, take out the garbage. And I showed him how to do it. This is how you do it. And he would say, Daddy, the garbage is too heavy. I can't lift it out of the garbage can. And I would say, well, you need to figure out how to get it out the garbage can because that's your job. And I'm not going to tell you how to do it, right? And so, of course, he thought long enough, and in that, so I could just tip this over and pull it out. I'm like, aha, you got it, right? But I could have easily told him or go get the bag. No, but in that, building competence, because he figured it out on his own. And so now he doesn't have that feeling, that missing feeling, or that feeling of inadequacy. Like, I can't do anything right. I don't know what to do. I can't do. No, you can do. You will do, in fact, because you're not going to survive otherwise. And so kids who feel inadequate, they compare with specific people. That's important. They compare with specific people. So when they're talking to you and they're like, you know what, I'm not as good as, and they name someone. I wish I was like, and they name someone, right? That means they're feeling inadequate. They don't feel competent.
And the last one.
I'm sorry.
No.
And a defensive attitude, meaning when you try to correct them or talk to them, the defenses go up. And it's a fight, right? Because they feel like, and they might even communicate this, like, oh, you're making me feel down, because they don't feel competent in the first place.
And the last one is purpose. That's a very inner need that our children need, so they need to feel purposeful in the family. If missing, they feel insignificant. And this can lead to common symptoms such as compulsive, driven spirit, defeat, and depression. One way this takes place in Team TUI, I call our Team TUI like my family. We hit all 4 of these. I have my children make me lunch in the morning. It creates a lot of different things. It feels they belong to the family. It creates worth, competence, and purpose. Now, for a while, I was getting some pretty soggy salads. I'd go home and correct them, teach them, and come back, and I get PBs and Js with, very all over the place, very messy. So one way I do this in my family is having them feel like they have a worth, they have a purpose, and it's letting them see that they keep the family going. They keep the family. Daddy's at work. He's enjoying the lunch right now that I made in the morning, so he can go work and come back and be part of the family. So this is one way I feel it's helped glue our family together better by just giving them little tasks that they see, all right, I'm part of this family, how do I contribute? And this is what they contribute for just one aspect of the family.
Let's look at some solutions. So the first solution to this idea of projecting yourself on your child is to model healthy identity yourself, right? Very key. For a long time, as we evaluated the behavior of young people, we focused on young people. But for the first time, I know in my profession of education, we're beginning now to look at the adults in young people's lives. Because young people behave according to the behavior that they've seen. And so if we want to have healthy identity in our children, that means we have to be okay in our own skin, right? I can't be a mom who looks in the mirror and says how fat I am, how this I am, how that I am, how this I am. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? I can't do that because my child will grow up and guess what? They'll be thin as a rail and they'll be like, man, I'm so fat and I'm so this and I'm so that. And you're saying, where are you getting that from? Well, I heard it from you. Right? If you're a dad, you want to make sure that you are putting forth the right identity, that it's not about money, right? It's not all about money, 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 money. We don't have enough money. We can't do this, money. I got to work longer hours, work. Because then you're going to have children who buy into that same philosophy, and that's what they'll want to do, okay? Those are just 2 simple examples, but you can stretch that out a lot more. And realize whatever you do, and of course, if you have little ones just seeing it already, right? You're like, wait, where'd you get that from? If only they could say to you, I learned it by watching you. Our kids will be what we are. So you need to be okay in your skin. You need to know that God has created you, and like I tell my own children, you're fearfully and wonderfully made. Every one of us.
So expose, don't impose. Healthy behaviors and lifestyles are more caught than taught. Let that sink in. Healthy lifestyles, they're more caught than taught. So we want to expose, not impose on our children. I can't pressure my child to become a disciple. The best thing I can do is expose my children by living out a daily life, showing my wife, showering my wife with love, affection, making a house full of joy, of peace, the fruits of the Spirit, right? And when my child becomes older, they're going to look at the world and the chaotic lives that are going on out there, and they're going to turn back to our house and see the life that mom and dad lived, and it's going to be a no-brainer for them. But I can't force them to become disciples. I have to expose it. I have to live it out daily, and it's going to be caught more than taught. Obviously, we're teaching the Bible too, but we have to really set the bar high so our children can be exposed to it at an early age and throughout their life.
And the third one is communicate love in a way that's not tied to performance. And what that means is, if we project on our children, typically we're only happy when our children are doing what we want them to do, right? So, you guys know that I'm very much into sports, particularly into the sport of basketball, right? I'm sure prior to having any children, or at least to having a son, I imagine that I will have a basketball team, right? Everybody will be like throwing it behind their backs and dunking it and all of this stuff. Well, guess what? I have a son who's not as interested in sports as I am. In fact, we were at a basketball tournament yesterday, and as I'm refereeing that, he's just sitting, having a good old time, probably playing Fortnite, enjoying himself. Not interested at all, right, in basketball. And so, guess what? If I projected myself on him, then I would be so disappointed in my child because he is not doing what I want him to do, what I envisioned him doing. And guess how that would help our relationship? It wouldn't. So we want to be very careful that we're not tying our love, our affection to the performance of our children because they are not living up to our expectation of what they should be doing in regards to our life, right? Me?
Yep.
Okay, so we're gonna help them. The fourth one here, we're gonna help them align their identity with their activity. And so as kids mature, they have to discover who they are and what they must do. So if you're raising young children, your kids don't know what they want to do, right? They don't. And so you don't want to, like Gerard was saying before, you want to expose them. You don't want to impose and be like, you know what, you're going to be a doctor. Let me give you the stethoscope and this is what you're going to do, right? And some of us, what we're really saying is, I was never able to be a doctor, and so you're going to do it now. Yeah. You're going to live out my dream. We don't want to do that. We can help by observing where their passions and strengths lie and then align those to their identity and to the activity they're going to engage in on a regular basis. My son, using him as an example again, he is not going to, he's not saying, Dad, teach me how to dunk. That's not what he's doing. But he did say, Dad, can you help me get some singing lessons? I'm like, that's not, let's go. Come on. He's like, can I get some singing lessons? Yes. Let's go to your recital where we're nice and quiet and we sit and, almost like cheese and crackers. But that's what he wants. He identifies with that. And so it's up to me now to make sure that I help him align those things, right?
Yeah, just to add too, like my son, I played soccer when I was little. I enjoyed soccer when I was little. And so my son, he started playing soccer. He enjoyed it. And then I played for 2 years. And this past year, he's like, you know what, Dad? I want to play basketball. I was like, but I played soccer. I coached you soccer, right? It's something he wanted. I was like, but I had to back off. And I thought too, the brothers play more basketball than soccer usually. So I'm thinking disciple long term. That if he wants to play basketball with Matthew, I think he wants to play Victor's son Matthew in his league. That's something where I don't want to impose soccer on him. He might come back to it, he might not, but I don't want to force it on him. I just want him to have a healthy lifestyle, obviously, physically healthy lifestyle. So it's basketball, swimming, running, singing, something where he can spend his time and energy in.
And then we have the last one here, offer them a blessing. Okay, adults, we have the opportunity to impart belief and acceptance in our youth. When they come up and they say basketball opposed to soccer or singing opposed to basketball, it's like, okay, confer the blessing, right? This is what we see in Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The blessing is passed on. And guess what? Those men were able to take what God had blessed him with and give him the glory. And that's ultimately it. So if you're going to sing, sing to the Lord, right? Sing to the Lord. Use that talent and that gift for the blessing of God. Some things we want you to keep in mind, okay? Something that we're not talking about because we don't want any confusion. So I'm not saying you shouldn't share any of your stories with your kids. I'm sure we have lots of stories to share with our kids. You want to share those stories. There's a huge difference between sharing a story, though, and teaching a life lesson and imposing your will on your child. I'm sharing stories because I want them to learn something. I'm sharing life lessons because I want them to learn something. But, saying to my kid, you have to do X, Y, and Z, that's not what I want to do.
So we're going to take some time here. Remember the fences. So the fences are used to keep our children safe when they are younger. But listen, they must be removed as they get older, right? If I still had my girl Tabitha, who's 11, in a pack-and-play and crib, you come to my house and be like, yo, you're crazy. She should be in a regular bed by now. If I kept her confined in a crib, that was the first fence really, right? A physical fence. But as they grow and as they get older, we want to remove fences and remove them adequately. Remember, your fences, the ones that you set up as a parent, they're going to be more caught than taught. Remember that. They're going to be more caught than taught. So if my fence, say with movies, right, is like PG, PG-13, whatever, and if I'm teaching that to my children, it's going to be more caught than taught. So when they develop their own fence, when they get older, it's going to be something where they can remember, reflect on it, that they saw it in the house while they were growing up. And our prayer as parents, obviously, is for them to make their fence as close to our fences, where we had our fences when we were raising them. But once again, we can't impose it upon them. They have to come to that conclusion, and they have to be willing and wanting to make their own fence. And there's 3 mistakes that the book did talk about, which are biblical in nature. The first mistake that we fail to do as parents, fail to provide any type of fence. And we can see this sometimes. Hopefully it's not happening here in the church, or if it is, we're going to correct it tonight. But, parents are too cool, right? They're too cool to develop any type of boundary, any type of line, any type of fence. So if we're not setting a fence, not setting a boundary, guess what? When those children grow up, they're not going to know how to develop a fence, how to develop their own type of boundaries, as they never were taught at home. Outside of Christ, I definitely wouldn't have been building a fence. I would have been, the cool parent, letting the kids do anything. And we see that, when the kids are allowed to have no fences at all, it leads to a lot of chaos. It leads to a lot of distress. You can see them interacting out in the supermarket. The mom's yelling, the kids yelling, the mom's yelling. They've never taught a fence in there growing up. Imposing fences, and Rob will talk more about this in a bit, but that's when they're growing up and they are gone. And the children have left the home now, and they've built their own fence. But the parents doesn't like the fence. So what they do, they intimidate, they coerce, and they want to control the boundaries. They don't like where the child set up their fence. And so they intimidate, they coerce, they try to get the child to move their fence to where the parents had their fence set up. And the last one is confusing fences. And this is really important as parents. We don't want to confuse God's fences with our fences, right? So we have a bedtime in our household. 8 o'clock is the bedtime for my children. Now, I can't show you book, scripture, and verse where it says 8 o'clock, thou children shall go to bed. But we can show a scripture saying that children obey your parents in the Lord. So what we want to do is let the children know what's a parental fence and what's a God fence. And don't give commandments as parents as if they're directly from the scriptures. We don't want to confuse the fences that we're setting up. We want to make it clear where something is that mommy and daddy, through experience and living life, we feel this is the best fence right now. And we want to, another fence might be if they're lying, that's obviously a clear biblical fence that we can show scriptures on.
So this idea of imposing fences, I think, so there's a natural process that happens in children. We can use ourselves as examples. We grow up in a household, and as we grow up in that household over time, especially when we get to our adolescence, young adulthood, we start to create our own fences, right? We start to craft in our own mind, based on what our parents taught us and other information, what we believe to be our own boundaries. What can happen in this process, if a parent is not aware of the growing process, they may knock those fences down, right? They may come with their own bulldozers, like no fence making in this house, right? And they create their own fence, child has no opportunity to build their own boundaries, and then we have this issue occurring. You typically see it where a child is saying, I need to leave, right? I want to get out. The problem is this. If the child has never begun to create their own fences and their own boundaries, when they do get out, they are without any boundaries, right? They are without any compass. And so what happens now, they go crazy. You know these kids. We know these kids. I know we know these kids. Typically, we say they go to private school or whatever. They have lots of boundaries, right? I'm talking about when we were growing up. They had lots of boundaries, and they went to college. Maybe they were in your room, your dorm, and they went out of their mind because it was the first time they had no boundaries. And their parents never helped them to create their own boundaries for themselves. I think it's very important, especially as your child is approaching 16 years old, that you start to help them figure out, by releasing a little bit, what's your boundary, right? Gerard brought up movies in the house. We had the movies in the house rule. And then as the kids get older, they're like, oh, we want to go see this. I'm like, that's PG-13. Now, of course, you're like 16, but that's PG-13. It might have a little, and then I realized, you know what? I need to step back and say, hey, this is what's in the movie. You decide if you think you should go, right? Because what's the goal? What am I raising? Adults. So what's going to happen to this adult that I'm raising? One day they're going to do what? They're going to leave. And if I haven't helped them in their own minds to figure out their own fences, they're going to leave and they're not going to know what to do out there. And they're going to get themselves into some trouble that could be destructive. As opposed to at 16, hey, hopefully you go, you'll come back, we can talk about it because it's an open dialogue. At 22, you're not coming back to tell me about it. Right? I might not even find out unless I'm on Snapchat or Instagram. And so you want to start that process as soon as possible because you're raising an adult. And your adult has to be able to do this on their own. They have to. There's no other way. What are we up to, Gerard?
The tools we must provide. You're still going on that.
Tools we'll provide. So the first thing we want to provide is models, right? We want to model the lifestyle we hope our children to embrace. So this is critical and key. Whatever lifestyle I want my child to embrace, I have to live it with as much fidelity as possible. Yeah. There can't be a double standard, right? I just told you about the movie thing, right? So I cannot tell my children, you cannot watch this kind of movie, and then when you go to bed, I'm going to watch that kind of movie. Our children are way too smart for that because they're going to check the iTunes account and be like, who's watching this? And then what are you going to say? I don't know how that got there, right? So whatever you want from them, you have to make sure that you're living that life. If you don't want your child to drink alcohol, don't drink alcohol. Right? Now, that's a no-brainer. I'm sure we get that, right? But whatever it is we want them to do, I'm telling you from 0 to whatever, you got to make sure you're walking a fine line because you know they're watching everything you do. Even when you think they're not paying attention, they're like peeking over their shoulder. They're like, did he just? And they're watching. Because one day, if your kids are older, you know they do this. When you say, hey, what are you using that? Why are you saying that? They're like, wait, didn't you say that the other day? And you're like, oh, man, they got me, right? So we need to make sure that we walk that fine line. The next thing we need to do is make sure that we give them the right worldview. So we must help our kids construct the framework that enables them to make good decisions. Ultimately, our worldview is coming from the Bible. Right? So we need to make sure that our kids are deeply rooted. And every time I say our kids are deeply rooted, that means I'm deeply rooted in the Bible. That's where I'm getting my worldview from. Critical thinking. They need to be critical thinkers. That's what we're talking about here. My child needs to know what to do when somebody comes up to them and says, hey, you want to smoke this with me? Does your child know what to do? Have you told them about that? Have they seen it? Have you talked about it? Because if not, and they don't know any better, they may say, okay. Because in their minds, they're going to catalog real quick and say, yeah, my parents never told me not to do this, so it must be okay. You need to make sure that they know what's going on out there, and they know how to critically think through it. As much as I don't like my kid, I don't like Manhattan at all, right? I could really never go there. In fact, I would run in the opposite direction to Riverhead and be in the country. But when my daughter says, can I go to the city with people, not me, with people? Of course, what do I want to say? Like, absolutely not, no. But at the same time, I'm realizing I'm preparing this material for you guys, and this is a good opportunity to grow in critical thinking, because you know what? Going out there and seeing it is a lot better than me trying to describe it to you.
That's right.
And so you learn a lot in that process. And of course, because of your age, you come back, we talk about it. And we don't even really talk, I listen. You give me, and I listen. And I only stop when there's something I need to stop and say, hey, what did you do there? Right, what happened there? Right? Because that's how you're gonna learn.
And just to add to that, like being a parent, for a while, I was like, I need to hide my children, right? So we were out about a month ago, 3 weeks ago in public, we were set up, and I felt like I had to hide my kids from something that was going on, because these adults were drunk, they were intoxicated, they were off their rockers, getting rowdier and rowdier. And then I said, oh, that's what alcohol does. And I kind of walked them, I talked them through it, versus trying to hide their eyes, hide their ears and stuff like that. I walked them through it. It got worse. The cops came now, walked them through that. They saw them getting arrested. So I walked them through the whole situation of why certain behaviors will lead, kind of this snowball. And my children that night, they took away, we covered the scripture. Daddy, I don't want to drink and smoke. I said, all right, So, we can't, we can't shelter. We have to talk them, walk them through it, so when they become adults or even the children, they can see what it does. I wanted to at first pick them up and move them. I was like, no, let's stay here. Let's walk them, talk them through it. And I was going through this book at the same time.
And so you can do the same thing that Gerard just talked about when you watch the news with your children, or you hear the news. You can talk through that with them. What is going on here? Why is this happening? A lot of it's going to have to do about people not following the Word of God and why we need to get out and preach the gospel. But you can talk them through it. And of course, we're saying this age appropriately. Yes. Please don't sit your 3-year-old in front of, CNN and the Gaza Strip and, talk to them about it. Like, let them grow up a little bit. And in fact, I will tell you, kids will let you know when they're ready to learn whatever they need to learn. Most of it's just going to go over their heads. And the last thing is just principles. We want to make sure we're offering principles for our kids. Not rules, but principles to live by.
That's right.
Right? That's ultimately what God does for us. He provides us principles. And then we apply them to the right situation. That's what we want to do for our children, to help shape their attitudes and their actions.
So mistake number 3, we prioritize being happy. We are living in a happy culture. Everything has to be happy. Everything has to be warm and fuzzy. Everything has to be right. I watched the Lego movie a little bit late to the game, like last year, 6 months ago. It came out 4 or 5 years ago. Their song, Everything is Awesome. And it kind of got repeated in my head. And now I know why 3 years ago everyone's saying everything is awesome, because it got really drilled into our culture. But we prioritize being happy. This is the problem with it. Parents seek approval from their kids. Once again, they want to be cool and hip. They don't want to set boundaries. They want to make their kids happy. We as parents, without serious guiding principles, so we never really have serious guiding principles. We know that we have those principles. We know the Word of God, and we're doing our best to live out the Word of God. But if we don't have serious guiding principles, we prioritize being happy over principle. Parents believe they have no moral authority to determine what's right or wrong. As Rob covered today, we're living in a time where everyone believes that their way is right. Their way is the best way. Without any vision, the people will perish. So we're living in this time now where I can't tell you as a parent what's right or wrong, because you have no compass. I can't tell Sophia that lying is wrong because Sophia has no biblical training. But if Sophia was raised in a biblical household, I can tell Sophia as a parent, as an adult, that lying is wrong. But we're living in a time and age where happiness has to trump everything else. Parents focus on the short-term goals and forget the long-term outcomes. So this is the history and research of it. We prioritize being happy. Parents used to lead by principles or led by principles. Parents base their leadership on a belief system where there was a clear right and wrong. Obviously, when God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, there was clear right and wrong. Unfortunately, as Robbie talked about today, America's not on the uptick, the world's on the uptick, it's on the decline. They're trying to get rid of the Ten Commandments, trying to get rid of all biblical principles, all biblical values. So with that, with no right and wrong, we prioritize being happy. Parents believe that discipline was the first trait every child needed to learn. And parents encourage their kids to interact with adults at every stage of life. And parents built a desire in kids to become adults. This reflects back on number 1, where we are training our children to become adults. We're not training a child, we're training adults to one day enter the real world. And we want to make happiness not the number 1 goal in our household.
So when it comes to the consequence of this, of prioritizing happiness, we have high arrogance, but low self-esteem. So you have kids who think, who are privileged and entitled, but in reality, they have very low self-esteem, very low confidence. Obviously, I showed a slide earlier today in the sermon where it said that teen suicide was up between the ages of 15 and 19. What is that? High arrogance, low self-esteem. The proverb says, where there is arrogance, destruction is not far behind. And so you want to make sure that your child is level, right? How many people have seen American Idol before? American Idol, what's the most exciting thing about American Idol? Is the people who can't sing, right? And what's exciting about that? Because you're wondering, why did they come to audition for American Idol? It's because someone told them, someone prioritized being happy and said, you sound amazing. You sound like Whitney Houston, right? Luther Vandross. And so they come on the show and they're like, oh yeah, all my friends, they love. And then you're like, what is going on here? This is what happens. That's that high arrogance. And that person, I don't know if you watch American Idol, I don't watch it now, but years ago, that person would usually leave that room weeping and crying because they're not as good as they thought they were.
Yes.
We don't want that to happen for our children. And so we're going to go through the solutions for this. I think this is going to be the last mistake we do today, and then we'll pick up mistake number 4 tomorrow.
Okay.
And so the first solution here is they need to hear, right? They need to hear the word watch. They need an example from you more than they need entertainment. Understand that. Kids are always looking for fun. They need an example from you more than they need entertainment. They need an example of how to grow wise as they grow up. I can give you many things as my child, but will it help you gain wisdom? I need to help you gain wisdom.
They need to hear the word practice. Remember, we're looking for long-term outcomes, not looking for short-term outcomes. So the short-term happiness will have to be sacrificed at moments to get the long-term outcome of having a well-rounded adult. They need to hear the word get ready, and they need to get ready for the not-so-pleasurable future, right? We've all entered adulthood, as Rob talked about today. I was talking to Summer upstairs. She was saying, I wish I was 6 again, comparing to Silas. So I'm like, wish you were 6 again. We always have this reflection. We want to be younger. And we know once adulthood hits, adulthood comes full force. So we want to prepare them for that. And they need to practice failing in our household or learning to miss the mark so we can train them and walk them through it. So when they become adults, they're ready for that leap.
They need to hear the word no. Say that with me, no.
No.
Right? They need to hear the word no. They need a mentor more than they need a buddy. Our kids have lots of friends, but only one mom and dad. We have to decide to play the card that isn't always fun, but earns their future love and respect. Right? There are many things that I did not agree with as an adolescent, but I love my dad and I respect him to this day. Right? Because what he was trying to do was raise an adult. He was not trying to raise a child.
And especially we're living in, so the word wait. So they need to learn to hear the word wait. The Incredibles 2 came out. My kids were pumped up. I was like, let's just wait a little bit, right? The anticipation, it grew. And when we went to go see it, I feel they appreciated it that much more. So waiting is not a bad thing. We got to really teach our children to wait because we're living in a more and more culture. It's now. So it's okay to teach our children to wait because they're going to have to wait for the job interview. They're going to have to wait for the whatever it may be. And if they can learn it now while they're young, it's going to help them much longer when they're adults.
Yeah, that's important, that weight. You know, Infinity War came out, and everybody and their mother, literally and their mother, went to go see Infinity Wars. And my kids were like, when can we go? I was like, well, we actually tried, and then the movie theaters were all booked up. And I said, well, let's wait. Before long, it's not in the theater anymore. And I was like, wow, this was a test, because if they really pushed, I would have been like, all right, let's go and see it. But they actually fell back and was like, okay, we'll wait for it to come on streaming. And then I think they saw it recently, the ultimate clean version, at a fellowship recently. So I was like, oh, that's perfect. I didn't even have to pay for it. And so the last thing our kids need to hear is the word serve. Serve, right? What do kids want to happen to them? They want to be served, right? You ever at home and your kid is like right next to something, they're like, can you get that for me? Or can you? And I'm like, wait, something's wrong here. I'm the older one. I need to sit back and relax. You need to get up and do this, right? And so this is something we really do have to adopt into our mindset, because I know here in the body, oftentimes I have to wrestle my brothers down, the older brothers, and say, look, there's young guys here. Let them do it. They're like, no, I still got it. And I'm like, I'm not saying you don't have it, but let these guys do the work, right? Because they're floating around like, we don't matter to anybody. No, let them do it, right? As soon as somebody says they need to lift something, I'm like, Robert, come over here, right? I'm like, why am I going to strain my back, right? I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, here's a strapping young man, like, come and serve, right? And serve. And so one of the benefits of that, I will tell you, if you can get them to do it in your home, is that now when they're not with you, right? When they're away from you, when you think they'll never do it ever because you have to wrestle them and fight with them to do it, when they're away and they do it on their own, and somebody contacts you and says, wow, man, your kids are so amazing. I didn't even have to ask them, and they washed the dishes, or they did this, or they did that. And you're thinking in your head, don't say it out loud, my kid? But that's when you know it's taking root, because they're doing it and you're not even watching, right? That's when you know it's taking root.
One thing I just wanted to encapsulate this scripture with my children. I talked to Rob about this before we had the VBS tonight. Ecclesiastes 7 verse 2, it's a very famous verse. This is the NIRV. It says, so it's better to go where people are mourning than to go where people are having a good time. Everyone will die someday. Those who are still living should really think about that. If you ask the children, they know what fun is, right? Our children know what happy is, and know what fun is. They know what Hershey Park, Chuck E. Cheese is. They don't need training in being happy. They need training in learning how to serve. And one thing when I was younger in my walk, or had the younger children, me and my wife spoke about funerals. I was like, I don't know. It's morbid. It's death. It's, this and that. Bring them. As Rob talked about today, death is part of life. And through exposure, once again, I'm not imposing on them, just exposing them to what's ultimately happening, what's going to happen to us. Now, the Tui family, we don't look at the obituaries every night to see whether the funerals are tonight. This is they arise. We go to them, okay? If there's one in the body, we'll go to them. If there's, if there's a coworker, I'll bring my family along. I don't leave them home. It teaches a lot of things. It teaches them how to serve. It teaches that life's not all about happy and joy. It's exposure once again. And what my oldest is really catching it now. She's learning that life is not all about money, right? Not everyone wins the game of life. And they're learning that life is more about the relationship with Christ. We went to 2 funerals within 3 weeks of each other. One was unfortunately my brother Artie. But before that, I went to a funeral where we knew the person was very selfish, very worldly, and he died outside of Christ. So they're learning at a young age, where do they want to leave? A legacy like our brother Artie, who really, lived a life of self-sacrifice, a life of servitude, or do they want to live a life of selfishness and of drugs and of alcohol that I couldn't really say much. I was called to do the eulogy at the funeral. I couldn't really say much. I had to make it as best as possible as I could. I couldn't lie, but at the same time, our children are seeing that. They're being exposed to that, and they're deciding at a younger age what path they're going to take once again.
And so we want to now have you guys kind of talk to each other. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have like 7 minutes. We want you to turn and talk, form your little, groups, talk about the information. In particular, any aha moments, connections that you can make, any ouch moments, moments where you were convicted, any shout outs where you've seen some of this in action in people's lives. And if you have any questions, we'll be able to talk. We're going to do that 7 minutes. 3 minutes, we're going to have a share out. And then 10 minutes, you'll have snack.
I know.
No, it's 7 o'clock.
Snack.
That's not me. My snack is right now. I know what I scheduled.
Wait, so right here, what time is this?
7 o'clock to 7:10. So
Right,
we
it's
end
already
at
7 now.
Yeah, we're supposed to end at 7:10. The snack is at 7. Oh no, you're right.
You're 10 minutes off.
Oh, all right.
Because it takes time to move 100 people.
Sure. You can go this way.
So you got to cut. You have to make a nursery announcement, but tonight there was light. What time do you do that? Pick up at what time? What time is that? Yeah, but after this class, too long. What time do you have parent pickup? 6:40. 8:10. So you want to change that time for parent pickup? Right, so change the time. Marlene. Me. Avery. Yeah, so we can tell them at signing, so what time do you want, they can tell the parent, come back at this time, on a regular day. You have it assigned for 8:10, but your lesson, what time is over in the lesson? That's my job. I got to do my job. Our job is to move people. Culture. So yeah, you guys are supposed to end at 6:50. I mean, at 7 o'clock. And where they gonna snack? There's 120. 27. Tomorrow we'll finish.
Number 3 is alive. Sure. Just for a time check, we have 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Talia, Chodo?
They'll know if we're just trying to make them feel easy or if we're truly they'll know. And your daughters are smart. They'll appreciate it if you're giving them encouragement. Like if they did something wrong and you're trying to just help them learn. But if we just praise them, no matter what it is, I think we lose respect. Because they get encouragement. So it's not a matter of giving them false praise, but saying if they fail, you don't necessarily have to, oh, you did it wrong. You have to be raising them. And say, what? We can bring it this way, or we can try that way. And say it in such a way that as my second we had a really bad story. So we tried threats. And, I said, listen.
Oh, what happened?
I told him, you can work as a mechanic, you can be a farmer, you funny. I was being very serious. So if you think you're not a good student, that's fine. But if you're lazy, that's different. And I think you're being lazy. And I told you that. I had him come and do all this work in my office with me. Not that I was doing it for him, but he was sitting with me throughout the whole day. I was checking out. And that quarter, he did really good. And I said, okay, for this next quarter now, let's go back to you doing it. And then he went down and said, you see, that's your mistake. You need to make sure you're doing it. I'm not going to baby you. No, I don't even know. So let's see how he does next. I was showing him that he has the decision. It's not me, no, it's too hard. Lazy people blame others.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap up our conversations. I'm going to ask each group to maybe select a comment or two that you want to share, and then we're going to start to share out a little bit. We're on a tight schedule. I got supervisors on my back. All right, so we're going to start to share out. We're going to start with Mr. Fred Brown.
Hello, everyone. Well, one of the things that I wanted to share with my group was an aha moment, and that was when it was shared as far as your example. A lot of times I think of myself as pride myself on setting the right example or being, setting the example. But then it made me think, sometimes as an adult, you feel you have the right to display a certain example, like, okay, stay up after hours or at a certain time, whereas they have to go to bed at a certain time. And that has caused conflict in our relationship and in the household. And I'm thinking, I'm an adult. I don't have a curfew. You do. But then again, to them, it's part of the example. So that was an aha moment for me, knowing that I still, even though I have the right as an adult, I still need to, certain things need to really go that extra mile.
I think that's a great example. I know for myself, there are times where I want to, that late night, it's late at night, you need to go out somewhere. CVS is open 24 hours. And there's times where I have to say, look, I'm not going to do this, because if I do it, then I'm giving license for everyone in my household to do it, right? So it'll just need to wait till the next morning, because I want to make sure that a guiding principle for my children is that when it's dark outside, that's not when you want to be out there. Right, so I definitely see where you're coming from with setting that example. Anyone else have a comment?
Hi. Right now I could say I'm truly blessed. I mean, God provided me a set of wheels so I can really be here with you guys. And, Friday I wasn't feeling well, and I could have used that as an excuse to not be here. But, I said, okay, God provided me with wheels, so that can't be my excuse for not being here. And I knew I had to work the next day early, so he provided for me a way to get there, despite the fact I only had less than 6.5 hours of sleep. But getting to it all, my life always had to be, maybe if I had this education so I could get this certain job, this better job, or, maybe I have to marry someone so I could have a family. But, the reality is, it's all in Christ. Christ is all you need. And once you have that, everything is fulfilled, just like Matthew 6:33 said. Just like Matthew 6:33 says, seek the kingdom of God and everything falls into place. I mean, what more can anyone ask for other than God? I mean, if you have a family in Christ, that's all that matters, and everything just comes to play.
Amen. Thank you. Can you pass this down to Laddie?
Thank you. So I shared in my group how, you know, I'm very much one where my son, he wants to show us, you know, things he's done or that, and you know, I'm the kind of the example that says, that's so great, great, you know, and even if it's not so great, you know, I'm just so excited he's doing something great. So the barometer is always, this is excellent, great, and so that nugget where, hey, listen, that A he drew it wasn't great, you know, so, you know, but it's good for me to kind of learn that now because, you know, I just get so excited that he's, so just running, okay, I have to kind of calm myself down. That was an okay A, you know, you could, you know, just work on that a little bit more and, you know.
Practice, 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 right?
Practice.
So I want to thank you all for spending this time with us. I know you spent a lot of time sitting in the pews. We appreciate it. Today's a long day, so I appreciate all you guys staying awake with us this hour. I do want to now encourage you guys all to get a snack, get some water, refresh yourselves before we come back for the last bit of Vacation Bible School today. Thank you, everyone. You're going to keep the quiz for yourself, bring it back daily so that you can keep track of where you scored the highest and pay attention to the